You know what's funny? A lot of gamers in 2026 still think the AMD versus NVIDIA war is just about FPS numbers. That's it. They open a benchmark chart, look at whichever GPU has the bigger number, and immediately decide who won. And honestly, that mindset is exactly why so many people regret their PC upgrades 6 months later. Because here's the thing nobody wants to admit right now. The GPU market in May 2026 is more confusing than it's ever been. Not because the hardware is bad. Because the marketing became smarter than the buyers. Look, you've probably seen it yourself. Somebody buys an expensive NVIDIA card because everyone online says DLSS is revolutionary. Another person swears AMD is destroying NVIDIA in value. Then somebody else shows ray tracing benchmarks. Then another person talks about VRAM. Then AI frame generation enters the conversation, and suddenly nobody is even talking about actual gaming experiences anymore. It becomes this weird tribal war, where people defend corporations like sports teams, and meanwhile, regular gamers are stuck trying to figure out why their brand new $700 GPU still stutters in certain games. That's the real story of May 2026. Because if you actually look closely at the current GPU market, something fascinating is happening. AMD and NVIDIA are no longer fighting the same battle. NVIDIA is fighting for technological dominance. AMD is fighting for practical value. And depending on what kind of gamer you are, either company can look like the winner. That's why this conversation became so messy. Now let's start with the obvious one. NVIDIA still dominates mindshare, and it's not even close. If you ask random gamers which GPU brand feels more premium, most will still say NVIDIA almost automatically. That brand perception is incredibly powerful. NVIDIA built years of trust around high-end performance, stable drivers, creator workflows, ray tracing leadership, and AI technologies like DLSS and frame generation. And honestly, some of that reputation is deserved. DLSS in 2026 is genuinely impressive now. Early versions looked soft and strange sometimes, but modern AI upscaling became frighteningly effective. In many games, especially at higher resolutions, DLSS quality mode can look nearly identical to native rendering while dramatically improving performance. That's not marketing hype anymore. That's real. And NVIDIA understands something extremely important about modern gaming psychology. People care about smoothness more than raw numbers. A stable, fluid experience feels better emotionally than inconsistent high FPS. That's why technologies like frame generation became such a huge deal. They don't just improve benchmarks, they improve perceived smoothness. And perception matters massively in gaming. But here's where things start getting uncomfortable. Because NVIDIA's dominance in technology also gave them confidence to push pricing harder than ever. And gamers are feeling that pressure now. Look at what happened throughout early 2026. GPU prices remained stubbornly high across multiple segments, especially in the upper mid-range and premium market. Gamers increasingly found themselves asking a dangerous question: am I paying for actual performance or for the NVIDIA logo? That question matters because AMD saw this weakness immediately. And instead of trying to out-NVIDIA, AMD changed strategy. AMD realized something critical. Most gamers do not actually need the absolute best ray tracing performance. Most gamers are not AI researchers. Most gamers are not rendering 8K cinematic projects every night. Most gamers just want smooth gameplay without destroying their bank account. That's where AMD became extremely dangerous in May 2026, because suddenly, cards like the RX 9070 XT started looking incredibly attractive to normal people. Strong raster performance, large VRAM pools, competitive efficiency, better pricing, and improving software support. And perhaps most importantly, AMD began winning emotionally with frustrated gamers. That part matters more than people realize. Because when consumers start feeling manipulated by premium pricing, they naturally drift toward brands that appear more consumer-friendly, even if the technical gap still exists in some areas. And honestly, VRAM became one of AMD's biggest weapons this year. This is probably the most important shift happening in the GPU market right now. Modern games are consuming VRAM at terrifying rates. Some AAA titles at ultra settings with ray tracing enabled can easily exceed what used to feel safe just a few years ago, and gamers are noticing. A lot of buyers who purchased expensive lower VRAM NVIDIA cards are suddenly becoming nervous about longevity. Nobody wants to spend premium money and already feel uncertain 2 years later. AMD leaned into that fear aggressively. More VRAM became part of their identity. And psychologically, it worked. Because VRAM is easy to understand emotionally. Bigger number equals safer future. Even non-technical buyers understand that instantly. Now, does that automatically mean AMD won May 2026? Not exactly. Because NVIDIA still dominates several incredibly important areas. Ray tracing performance still matters, especially as more developers optimize heavily around it. Creator workflows still heavily favor NVIDIA in many professional applications. CUDA remains massively important in AI workloads and productivity ecosystems. And DLSS plus frame generation still creates smoother experiences in many demanding games. In other words, NVIDIA still owns the premium technology image. AMD owns the smart buyer image. And those are two completely different psychological markets. But here's the surprising part. The real winner of May 2026 might not be either company individually. It might actually be competition itself. Because for the first time in a while, NVIDIA started feeling genuine pressure again. And whenever NVIDIA feels pressure, consumers usually benefit eventually. AMD forced conversations about pricing. AMD forced conversations about VRAM. AMD forced conversations about value. Without that pressure, GPU pricing could look even more absurd right now. At the same time, NVIDIA forced AMD to improve software quality faster. They pushed AI features harder. They pushed frame generation technology forward. They normalized technologies that now influence the entire gaming industry. So both companies are shaping modern gaming in very different ways. But if we're asking who dominated May 2026 overall, the answer depends entirely on what metric matters most to you. If you care about cutting-edge features, AI technology, ray tracing leadership, creator ecosystems, and premium experiences, NVIDIA still looks dominant. If you care about value, VRAM, practical gaming performance, and resisting absurd pricing trends, AMD feels stronger than it has in years. And honestly, that balance might actually be healthy for the PC market, because monopoly-like dominance is terrible for consumers long-term.
Competition forces innovation. Competition forces pricing pressure. Competition forces companies to earn loyalty instead of assuming it. And gamers desperately needed that again.
Now here's the mistake I keep seeing people make online. They try to declare one universal winner. That's the wrong question completely. The smarter question is, which company currently fits your actual needs better? Because blindly buying NVIDIA for branding is stupid. Blindly buying AMD because internet comments told you it's better value is also stupid. Context matters. Your monitor resolution matters. Your game library matters. Your budget matters. Your upgrade cycle matters. Your electricity costs matter. Your workflow matters. And honestly, most gamers should probably stop chasing ultimate performance altogether. Modern GPUs became so powerful that balance matters more than raw dominance now. A balanced PC with a sensible GPU often feels dramatically better long-term than an overpriced system chasing benchmark glory. That's the lesson May 2026 is teaching the entire gaming industry right now. Not that AMD destroyed NVIDIA. Not that NVIDIA crushed AMD, but that gamers are finally starting to question hype more carefully. And that shift matters a lot more than people realize. Because once consumers stop buying emotionally and start buying strategically, the entire industry changes. Prices change, marketing changes, hardware design changes, everything changes. And honestly, that's probably the best thing happening to PC gaming right now.